think a good number are yet to come. The rain may have stopped them, but they will come in a few minutes. So we were talking about our worldview in the context of the law, or the law in the context of our worldview. Last week we very briefly discussed about Romans chapter 13, the most foundational passage on our response to the law and authority. Law and authority always go together. There is no law without authority, there is no authority without law. There may be law, but nobody to enforce it. So then law will be dead. There are so many dead laws. Even though they are made by the right authority, still they are dead because either there is nobody to enforce it or nobody wants to enforce it. So we talked about the nature of the authority, that it is government, that it is delegated. Their authority is only delegated. They don't have authority in themselves. The peculiarity of the delegated authority is that it can be taken away at any time. Delegation is never permanent, it's for a purpose. So the authority of all the governments is limited in that respect. Secondly, we have seen that every subject, every person under that authority is required to obey that authority. Disobedience to authority is disobedience to God, the God who constituted that authority. So authority at any level, the smallest level in the home, like children to parents or wives to husbands, or to a much larger level in the church, believers to elders, whatever level this authority is, that authority is to be obeyed. Disobedience is taken very seriously by our God. So it is required that every citizen obeys the government. Then we have seen that governments are given this authority by God to execute righteous laws. Absolutely, governments or nations are not lawmakers. There is nothing called a lawmaker according to Christian concept. There is only law enforcement agencies. Laws are already made by God. The broad spectrum of the laws are made by God. Bylaws and articles and all made by government, so that God's law will be enforced. That's it. God's law says thou shalt not kill or murder. Governments have to make bylaws so that no murder will take place. And if somebody commit murder, then he will be punished. That's what. But nowadays we know that governments go ahead and make laws that permits murder, such as infanticide, abortion. No, that's murder. Governments are not given permission by God to make such laws. It's an encroachment upon divine law and upon divine authority, which is a very serious crime. So governments are to execute God's will upon its subjects. Anyone resisting God's delegated authority is rebelling against God and God's authority. And governments are given the sword by God to punish the evildoer. Those who violate God's law, God wants the punishment to be given by the government. For those who commit murder, for example, capital punishment. Those who shed man's blood, his blood shall be shed by man. The man, eventually we know that it is the government. So that's a capital punishment. There are other punishments, governments. Every country will have civil procedure codes and criminal procedure codes, law of evidence, and all these laws are to punish the evildoer and also to protect those who are the victims of the abuses of others. So to those who do evil, the government ought to be a terror. That's what Romans 13 says. They are a terror. When people are not afraid about the government, when they do evil, that means the government is really not a government. When children are not afraid of parents when they do evil, that means there is no parental authority in that home. Though there may be a man called father or mother, but that's only a figurehead. Children do not have any fear for them, respect for them. So parents have to instill that fear in the minds of the children, because they are the duly established authority by God to exercise authority over children and to punish children's mistake. But it's sad to see that many parents have failed, sadly, I will say that. And governments ought to be the protector of the doer of good. They should be rewarding those who do good. Yes. So both aspects governments have to do. Those who are abiding by the law, they should never be terrorized by the government. Sometimes they do that for no reason. The police can stop you simply because they want some money. And they sometimes say that. They will simply say that. That's it. Why did you stop me? Pay 200 rupees. It's a form of extortion. By forcibly you are taking away the money, without telling you even what's your offense. Often there is no offense. So governments should be a terror to the evildoer, but they should be a blessing to those who wanted to obey God's law. Every citizen is said to support the government not only by praying and obeying the laws, but also by paying taxes and customs and duties and all those things. Romans 13 very clearly says, we needed to pay our government taxes. Here many times we are guilty. If we can get away with taxes, we will do. You go to the buy ornaments or gold, and not very many people pay tax because it's heavy amount. They just wanted to buy it and go away. If you insist, they will give a bill and all. Even that you do not know truly that's the right bill. But anyway, we are supposed to pay the taxes and duties and all that. It's a part of our duty to government. Government has no authority in themselves to exact or enact any law contrary to the laws and the moral principles of God. God is the ultimate, the absolute ruler, the absolute legislator, the absolute lawmaker, and He has already given it through the natural law and also through the special law. All those natural law and special law, that is the Bible, there are many moral laws are enacted, beginning with parents, children, obey your parents. That's a moral law. And government cannot make any law that will abrogate that principle. Children, you don't have to obey your parents. Government cannot make a law. Parents have to bring their children in discipline, including corporeal punishment, using the stick, the road. But governments have made the law that, parents cannot punish their children, Well, that's wrong. Should a Christian obey? A Christian need not to obey it. That's not disobedience, disobeying the government. That is disobeying the wrong, law of the government. The government is not given any authority to make such a law, and when they make such a law, just like Daniel or Shadrach, Meshach and other people have resisted or refused to obey such laws, we should refuse to obey. But then if we refuse, they will give us punishment. That we gladly accept without challenging. Just like the three boys, when they were thrown into the furnace, they did not resist. No, they did not. The government has the authority to do that. That's a misuse of authority, but yet they did not resist. Daniel did not resist when he was put in the lion's den. So if we spank our children and the police take case against it and they put in jail, gladly you should go to jail. We should not stop punishing our children, fearing the punishment. No, we should fear God and obey God's law, and we should gladly take. But The caliber of our believers is not of that. Believers, they would rather obey the government and avoid the punishment. Of course, the fury of God in refusing to obey His law, well, people say, we'll see it when it comes. Anyway, He's not going to punish immediately, at least sometime. No, this is all wrong. So what we say, government's legislative authority is limited. They could make only sub-laws or bylaws in order to enforce divine laws. The establishment as well as the removal of a government is done by God. When a government is not following the principles of the delegated authority, when they violate or they step over, they encroach upon God's realm of authority, then God will remove the government. The due process of law sometimes will be taken. In democracy, it's usually through election. But in monarchy and oligarchy and many other forms of government, God will use other means to remove. But it is finally for God, and He removes. He removes. The Congress government was removed. The UPA government was removed because there was so much, abuse of authority in enmassing, money wrongly. The public money. Now the present government, they only started. We need to wait and see whether they honor God or not. We need to wait and see. So God establishes, God confirms certain governments. Even though we don't like it, God allows them to rule for many years because they are following the principles of the delegated authority, and they honor God's laws, and therefore government allows them to rule. But some of them God will remove. No government is given the authority to enact any law concerning the citizens' freedom of worship. They can make laws and bylaws to ensure the freedom of worship, but they cannot make any law to take away the freedom of worship. When they do that, they are encroaching upon it, and then that very shortly that government will go. They cannot. Any governments that have tried in the past also had to bring in laws to restrict the freedom of worship or the freedom of religion, etc. Definitely God has removed them. So these are great principles. It's interesting that Peter in his epistle adds an emphasis that even cruel rulers should be obeyed. മൂർഖന്മാർക്കും കൂടെ എന്ന മലയാളത്തിൽ he was making reference to Nero directly. Nero was such a cruel emperor, persecuting Christians and many innocent people. So Peter said, obey them. The only authority to remove Nero is God. It's not for Christians to remove them. In the making of the Second World War, Hitler was a very cruel ruler, that he wanted to destroy all Jewish people, and he also wanted to remove Christians and all that. And then, what is his name? Cost of Discipleship, written by... Yes. He wanted to get rid of even Hitler at one time. He encouraged Christians that we should resist the rule by force. That was wrong for him. He was a great man, but it was wrong. Of course, finally Hitler got rid of him, wrongly. We can never sabotage a government. We can never organize to, kidnap the Prime Minister or kill the Prime Minister or anything of that sort. No. We can cry to God and pray to God. We can, still obey the right laws. The wrong laws we will not. We will resist. In certain countries like America, a lot of people have gone, pastors, others have gone to jail for spanking their children. They publicly said, we will. Some of them have taken away their children, they've gone in the court to get back the children. It's a fight, it's still going on in some places. It's a God-given right of the parents to punish their children the right way, not the abuse. When they abuse parents, they are going beyond. They don't have any right. But government has no business of telling that parents cannot discipline their children. Government can say that parents can discipline their children, but should not abuse the authority. Yes. The physical punishment, corporal punishment should not be to such a nature that it will destroy either the mental or the physical welfare of the child. That government could say, but government can say no spanking. A government, when it says, it is stepping over God's authority. We are not supposed to obey those laws. So every believer who is obeying the government is actually, they are obeying God. And Romans 13 says, for conscience sake we need to obey. For conscience sake. Because when you go to pray, your conscience will be hurting you and saying, hey, God is not going to hear it. Why you pray? Because you are disobeying government in the the right way, in the sense that the right rules and regulations of government. So we should be very careful, not only in paying the taxes and duties and customs, but also in this matter of obeying the government. But whenever the government cross over the lines God has drawn for them, we ought to take cognizance of those laws. And we need to, Amram and Jochebed, they disobeyed Pharaoh. Pharaoh very sternly said that, all male children should be, thrown to, given to the crocodiles in the river of Nile and all that. But they said, no, we won't obey it. We not only will keep the child with us, but if at any time we can no more keep it, then we will challenge the government. That's what they did. They put the child right where the daughter of Pharaoh come to take baths. Yes. So it was a blatant challenge to the law. We will do it. And the sister stood there. She identified all surely. Went and said, I'm the sister. Can I call my mother to feed the baby? Well, that family, even a little sister, they brought their children boldly. That's what it is, the boldness there. So we can do that. We can do that. Pharaoh was a cruel ruler, you know that. He was not a man with whom you could talk some sense into his brain. No, they were cruel monarchs. They could do anything. They could kill people. They don't have to explain to anybody else. But yet, even Miriam was actually challenging. And so, yes, God establishes governments to ensure God's laws will be smoothly obeyed by God's people. There are moral laws, civil laws, criminal laws, whatever sphere it is, every citizen must be able to obey the laws of the country without any coercion, without any threatenings, without any undue punishments and all those things. So, but that's the function of the government. So, a question is often asked is in democracy. Democracy is the government by the majority, right? So, the majority votes to bring a government into power. In India, for example, 80% of the people are Hindus. I don't know whether the voting was done on religious basis. I hope it is not. But suppose it is 80% of the Hindus vote a government, then should that government be making concessions to the 80% of the people who brought the government into power? Or should the government be making concession to the minority? Now that's a big issue in India, That's a big issue. Even A.K. Antony has said that the Congress policy of appeasing the minority is a wrong policy. Democracy is a government of the majority. You cannot keep a nation running and all the money be spent, protecting the rights of the minority only. No. What about the majority? I think, I believe in that every citizen should be equally treated. There should be, economic reservation, such reservation so that everybody will be equally cared for. But our governments in the past have been spending all the money, pumping all the money on ethnic minority. And at the cost of the ethnic majority, ethnic majority. The upper class Hindus and even the Christians, we don't have reservations. We cannot get any jobs because all the jobs are taken away by the ethnic minority. That should not be the basis. There should be ways to bring them up, but not at the cost of the one. So this question, should government be making concession to the majority? Because the majority has brought the government into power. So this whole matter is debated everywhere. Is it wrong for the government to make concessions to the majority? Is it? Well, I can say that once a government comes into power, it is not the government for the majority or the government for minority. It is the government of the people. Right? Because democracy is not the government of the majority, for the majority, by the majority. It is the government of the people, for the people and by the people. So we have to see it in the right perspective, that every citizen must be given, due portion in wherever it is. Government should not be favoring one religion over the other religion, unless it is a theocracy. My fear is India will move to theocracy. Nepal was, but now it's no more. I think they have taken away their theocracy there. It was a Hindu nation, but now it's a secular nation. India is a secular nation today, but definitely is some quarters want to make it a theocracy. Then the rule will be by whatever religion stands out. Pakistan is a theocracy where Islam is the religion. So when it becomes a theocracy, definitely anyone who does not belong to that sect of religion or belief, they are going to suffer. They are really outcast, just like in Israel, It's a theocracy, that means only Jewish people. Anybody who is a pagan? No, they have no right there. Even if they are allowed, they should be the slaves and to do menial services to the Jewish people. That was the only permission. You should make them slaves. But drawing your water and cutting your wood and, hard labors. So that sort of a thing could come to India also. If that comes, what should be the response of the Christians to the government? That's a big question. In a theocracy, actually, certain sections of the people cannot exist. In Muslim countries, theocracies, every non-Muslim, of course, Gulf, they give visas for work and all, but you apply for citizenship, you cannot get it. If you get citizenship, in places like Dubai, UAE, I think they give limited number of, but you go to Iran or you go to Saudi or somewhere, you cannot. You have to become a Muslim. If not, you cannot. When Ayatollah Khomeini, that man has come, he said that every non-Muslim will be given 3 years or 4 years to become a Muslim. If not, the choice is leave the land or be executed. That's it. Beyond that date, you wanted to continue, then you will be killed. Otherwise, you can leave the country. So this sort of problems come. This is all governmental problems. When the law, we are talking about law, what provisions, what our responses we have, how will we respond to the law? The Muslims, the Christians, the Sikh, the Jains, and other minorities. Should the government be arming the majority against the minority? How could the government be neutral in ruling? Shouldn't the people feel that we are all citizens and our rights are guarded and our privileges are allowed to be enjoyed by us, this is very major problems, and I hope that we will pray hard so that India will remain a true democracy of a secular state, not a religious state. If that happens, then, So Christianity being a minority in India, to what extent we Christians could influence the government is a question. That's in a theocracy, of course, if it's a Christian country, all believers can get involved in government because it's a Christian country. But in a secular country where Christianity is a minority, born again Christians are 0.5%. Nominal Christians, including all everybody, what? 2.5%, 3 or 4%. Some accounts say up to 4% maybe, but still 96% are non-Christians. So we Christians, I think, should not be involving in politics as such. But our next subject is politics, so we'll talk more about it. So what are we saying? We have a Christian perspective of law. The Christian perspective of law. What is that? I think we Christians need to understand that Christian perspective of law, then only our worldview will be correct. There are 5 major pillars upon which this Christian perspective of law is built. They need to be understood very firmly by every Christian. The 5 pillars of our Christian view of law. The first one is the analogous nature of the law. That is, our God is a lawmaker, is a person. God is one who makes law, and He systematically orders and executes the law. And a portion of that execution He has delegated to man, to different governments. The analogous, analogy, the analogy. Analogous means, yes, and analogous watches and all that, many things. Scientists should be better aware of that one. So our law is on the human level, we see the law in the light of divine law. There is the absolute lawgiver. He has all the laws, under whom there are governments. To these governments, God has delegated a portion of His authority, actually, over the citizens in executing the law. And God said that, okay, I am the absolute authority, but I'll give you this privilege, that you rule the people for me. That's what delegation is. So whatever they make the law, we must see that law to be analogous to what the divine laws are there. If these two cannot be concurrent, congruous, then it's not valid. God's law says thou shalt not kill, and man's law says thou shalt kill. God's law says thou shalt not commit adultery, but man's law permits adultery. God's law says that thou shalt not covet, and man's law says do it. God's law says children obey your parents. Man's law says no, you don't need to. You can disobey your parents. So the Christian principle of law is that any law that is made has to be analogous to the divine law. That's a pillar upon which. So we judge the correctness or the wrongness of the law by judging whether these laws are analogous to divine law. Every Christian ought to make this judgment. Is this law? That means we Christians need to be very carefully following the law-making process. When a law comes to the parliament or the legislative assembly, we should not be saying, hey, that's their business. No, we are here. We are here to judge those laws. We need to educate our people about the nature of this law. This is a law that is in harmony with the divine law. Therefore, we must support it and obey it. Or this law has these weaknesses, and we must represent to our MLAs and MPs that these provisions should be amended because it encroaches upon the moral laws or the bigger law of God. We can write it to our MLAs and we can write to our MPs. We can write in the editor's column and everywhere. We should not just keep silent. Because we have that God-given responsibility for all these things. We are not here simply to go make some money, work and make some money, buy some rice and some salt and some vegetables and feed our children. No. Yeah. We are God's representatives on the earth. We have these responsibilities of judging the law. Judging the law. So we need to know that. So the analogy, the analogous nature of the law is very, very important. So many laws